Hello YouTube, Raul here. In today's video we're gonna build a quiz game using React, Redux, Redux Saga, Redux Toolkit and the Open Trivia database. Let me first show you how this game is gonna work. So the first screen is gonna be an input where you can type your name. Then you press start game, we get a short loading and there was also a button on which you could click to cancel the game. Now here at the top we have a timer which is set to 60 seconds. On the right corner we have the number of questions left to answer. On the left we have our score. Here in the center we have the questions, and for this I only used true and false questions, so we have true and false. And at the bottom we have the quit game button. So if we press and answer the questions, you can see I answered 2 questions correctly and we have 3 questions out of 10. So let's finish all of them. And on the end screen we have game over, we have our score, so I answered 5 questions correctly out of 10. We have a try again button which will take us to the first screen, and here we have a table which contains the questions, our answers, and if they are colored in red, then that means we had a false answer, or a wrong answer actually. If they are colored green, that means our answer was correct. So these 3, that one and the second to last one, were correct. So what we are gonna use for this? We're gonna use the Open Trivia database, which is a public API for which you can get trivia questions. You can set it up in different ways. So here you have some inputs, some selects actually, to get the exact URL that you need. For me, I'm just gonna get the type as true and false questions. The number of questions is gonna be 10. Then I'm gonna click generate API URL. And we're gonna get this API URL. If you want to set your project up differently, you can, but make sure to also add the changes. So for example, if you want 20 questions, there are gonna be places in your app where you will have to change some stuff from what I will do, or actually some values. Okay, we're gonna keep this open because we're gonna need this URL later. Then we're gonna use Redux Saga. So if you want an introduction to Redux Saga, I have 2 videos with the basics and the advanced concepts of Redux Saga. Links will be in the description below. Also for our Redux logic, we're gonna use Redux Toolkit. Again, link to the whole playlist for everything you need to know about Redux Toolkit will be in the description below. And as a first in my video tutorials, I will use Tailwind CSS at the end of the video to style the application like you saw in the demo. As a quick mention, I just passed 100 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you everyone who subscribed. If you didn't, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment to this video if you enjoyed it, and also like it. This will motivate me to make more videos like this, and you'll help me out a lot. So thank you all. Now let's get started. Jumping into VS Code, I have a new app created with Create React App, from which I deleted the unnecessary files. I just left app.js. I removed the boilerplate code, just have a div with hi in it. Then we have an empty index.css. We're gonna need this later to add Tailwind, so I'm gonna show you how to do that in the second part of the video. And an index.js in which I include the index.css, get the app and render it. Before we do anything else, let's install the libraries that we need. So I'm gonna run npm install --save react redux at redux.js/toolkit, and also Redux Saga for the moment. We're gonna see how we can add Tailwind CSS when we actually need it. So let's just run these for the moment. Now we're gonna wait for these to finish. Now that these are finished, let's run npm start and let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is create a new folder for our Redux store. In this folder, I'm going to create an index.js, and here we are going to create the store in a moment. Another file that I'm going to create is the root reducer. So I'm just going to call it reducer.js. And the third one is going to be a saga.js. So these three are the main files that we need for our store. The reducer is going to contain our root reducer. The saga.js is going to contain our root saga. And in index, we're going to create the store. Let's create the reducer first. So here we are going to import combine reducers from Redux. Later we are going to get the reducers that we create, and for the moment let's just export default combine reducers and put an empty object in there. React is gonna complain a little bit and we're gonna get a warning in the console, but we don't care about that for now. In Redux Saga, so in the root saga, let's import all from Redux Saga /effects. At the end, we are going to export default a generator function, which is going to have a yield all. And inside this all, for the moment, we're going to have an empty array. And in this array, we are going to put our sagas after we create them. And the last part of our store is to actually create the store. So let's import configure store from at redux.js /toolkit. Then let's import the default export from Redux Saga and call it create saga middleware from Redux Saga. Then I'm gonna create a new constant called saga middleware, and it's gonna be a call to create saga middleware. Next, let's create a constant called store, and it's gonna be a call to configure store, and it's gonna have a configuration object. This configuration object needs a few parameters. First of all is gonna be the reducer, so I'm gonna import the root reducer from ./reducer. I'm also going to import the root saga from ./saga so we can run it later. And now let's continue with the configure store. So the reducer key is gonna get the root reducer. And now we have to add our saga middleware. So to the middleware key, we're gonna use the functional form for this. We're gonna get the default middleware and we're gonna call it. We're gonna pass a configuration object to it with thunk set to false because we don't want Redux thunk in this one. And to the return of this function, we are going to concatenate, so .concat, the saga middleware. So this way you can replace the thunk middleware, which is added by default by Redux Toolkit, with the saga middleware. The last two things we have to do is run saga middleware.run and pass the root saga to it and export default store. Now let's link this store in our index.js file. So I'm gonna import the provider from React Redux and also gonna import the store from the store folder and the index. Now I'm gonna wrap the app with provider, pass the store and put the end tag after the app. Okay, now if we save, if I open the DevTools and go to the Redux tab, I should also refresh the page, we get the Redux DevTools. So this way we know that our store was linked to our application because Redux Toolkit adds the Redux DevTools by default, so we don't have to worry. Next, let's set up the main pages of our application. We're just gonna leave them blank, but let's have them created for when we need them. So I'm gonna create a new folder called pages. And inside of these pages, I'm gonna put all my pages. I'm not gonna create separate folders for them because I'm just gonna have these pages, so it's not really complicated. I won't need components for each page. So I'm gonna have a main page. I'm gonna have a start game page.js. Then we're gonna have a fetching page. So this will be the page that's actually shown when the questions are fetched. Then the next one is gonna be the game page, so the page where that shows our questions, and the last one is the end game page. The fun part about this quiz game that I'm building is that we will put all the logic inside our Redux Saga, so we won't use logic inside of our pages, we'll just use them to display some data. Now, going into the main page, let's create our general component. So I'm gonna use a shortcut from an extension called ES7, this ES7 React Redux GraphQL snippet. So I'm gonna use this extension to generate my components. If you have it installed, you will just have to type RAFCE and it will create a functional component for you. For the moment, I'm just gonna say main page inside this div. Let's go into app.js and add this main page. So import main page from /pages main page, and let's put it replacing our div. I'm also gonna just have a React fragment here because we don't actually need a div. Okay, and now you can see we have main page here. Now let's do the same for our other pages. In the start game, RAFCE, enter, and we get the start game page. I'm just gonna say start game here and save it. Now the fetching page, the same, fetch. Then in the game page, we're gonna say game. We will add some more data in these as we go along with the app. So end. Now that I have created all of these pages, let's import them all into mainpage.js, because this is where we will use a switch statement to display our app's content. So import start game from start game page, import game from game page, import fetching from fetching page, and import end game from the endgame page. Great. Now I won't be displaying these for the moment. We will add them in a switch statement when we get the condition for our switch inside of our Redux store. So that will be in a moment. Let's first go and create our first part of the Redux store. So our first slice. I'm going to create a new folder here called slices. And the first slice we're going to create is called gameinit.js. Inside of this game init, we are going to import create slice from @Redux.js toolkit. Then we are going to create a constant called initial state, which is going to be an object. In this object, we are going to put the stage, which is going to be which part of our application we are displaying at the moment. For the moment, I'm just going to put one in here. We're going to create some constants for these so we don't have to get numbers. Okay, and the second part of the state I want to add for now is the username. For the moment, it's going to be an empty string. This username is going to be what we type in the input at the start. Now, as I told you, I want to have some constants defined for these because I don't want to remember the numbers, but we can do this without constants too if we want. I prefer the constants way because it's easier for me to remember. So I'm going to create a utils folder. In this utils folder, I'm going to create a constants.js file. And inside of this constants.js, I'm going to export a constant called start game all caps, and it's going to be start game as a string. So we're going to do this for all of them. So export const game is going to be game, then export const fetching game is going to be fetching game. I do this just because I don't want to remember numbers. This way we will have all of them named. Endgame and endgame. Now going back to our init slice, I'm gonna import all of them as stages from utils folder and constants. And now instead of stage 1, let's call it stages dot start game. So this will be the first page that we display. Now let's create our slice. So const game init slice is gonna be create slice, and then we're gonna have the name for it game state. I'm gonna call it the game state because this actually, let's also give it the same name. So we're gonna have the game state and also the same name. This will be the first part of the names of the actions that are gonna be dispatched from this state. Then we're gonna pass the initial state, and then we're gonna create the reducers object. In this reducer object, we're gonna put all our reducers for this slice. Now at the end, let's create our exports. So we're gonna export const, it's gonna be an empty object, so we're gonna destructure the gamestate.actions. So these are gonna be named exports, and then at the end I'm gonna export default the gamestate.reducer. This way we have our reducer exported default, and here we will put all our created actions so we can export them and dispatch them from everywhere in our app. Now let's add the reducer to our root reducer. So I'm gonna import game state from slices game init, and here we're gonna just pass the game state. Now if we open the Redux DevTools, I'm gonna also put them here at the bottom and make it a little bigger. If I refresh the app and we look at the state, now we have the game state with the stage and the username. Okay, let's create our first reducer. The first reducer we are going to create is the start game reducer. It's gonna get the state and the action, and inside of it we are going to set the state.username to be equal to action.payload.username. So we're gonna expect the username key inside the payload, and also set the state.stage to be equal to stages.fetchGame. So we're gonna move our game to the next stage. If the state will be stage.startGame, we will display the start game page. If the stage is fetching game, we will display the fetching game page. Let's export this action so we can dispatch it. So I'm gonna just put it inside of here. Now let's go to our start game page, and inside of this start game page we are going to add the input and the button so we can dispatch the action. So let's first import use state from React. Let's create a new constant called username and set username as a call to use state, and the initial value is going to be an empty string. Then inside of the div I'm going to have an input with the value of username. The on change is gonna be, we're gonna get the event and set the username to event.target.value. Also I'm gonna put a placeholder for now so we know what it is. I'm just gonna call it your name and close the input, and then a button with an on click handler, which is gonna be a call to start game handler. It's gonna be a function which we're gonna create in a moment, and the text on this button is gonna be start game. Okay, now it threw an error because it doesn't know what start game handler is. So let's create start game handler, and inside of this start game handler we will have to dispatch the start game action. Let's import that action. It's gonna be import from the store slices game init. From here we will get our start game action. We also have to get the use dispatch hook from React Redux. We're gonna initialize this hook into a constant called dispatch, and it's gonna be a call to use dispatch. And now using this dispatch constant, we can dispatch some actions. So we're gonna dispatch the start game. And as a parameter, we're gonna give it an object with the username that we have from the input. And this is it for our start game component. Now that we have something to show inside of our main page, let's go into the main page and display these pages conditionally. So I'm gonna import again all as stages from the utils folder, from the constants. And now let's get the stage from the Redux store. So to do that, I'm gonna also import use selector from React Redux, and let's get the constant. Current stage is gonna be use selector. We're gonna get the state and return state dot gamestate dot stage. So this is this constant right here that we have in our Redux store, which contains the start game at the moment. Now let's create a let, which is gonna be called displayed page. And now inside of a switch statement, we are going to switch the current page. And in case we have stages dot start game, then displayed page is gonna be start game page, and we are going to break here. The next one is gonna be stages dot fetching game, and here displayed page is gonna be the fetching page, and again break. The next one is gonna be stages dot game, and displayed page is gonna be, oh, it's not two dots here, it's an equal, my bad. And we're gonna have the game, and the last one is gonna be stages.endgame, in which the displayed page is gonna be equal to endgame. And inside of the default case, we are just gonna break. So we won't do anything there. And now instead of just displaying this text right here, we are going to display the displayed page. Again, I'm gonna put it inside of React fragment because we don't need the div at the moment. Okay, now if I refresh the page, we cannot get the state. So let's see what's wrong with that. Okay, so it was just a mistype here. It was supposed to be state.gamestate, not gamestage. Now if I refresh, we see our start game page right here. And if I type something inside the input and press start game, we get our gamestate/start game action dispatched. And if we look at it, it has the username payload. Now let's continue and create our first saga inside of this project. So let's create another folder called Saga. Inside of this, we're gonna create a game init file again, because inside of this, we are going to put all of our Saga actions for this game init slice. Let's first create a basic Saga. So we're gonna import all from Redux Saga /effects. Then at the end, we are gonna export default of generator function. And inside of this generator function, we are going to yield all and just leave it like this for the moment. We are going to change it up a little bit later. Inside of this game init saga, we are going to export default a generator function, and let's call it start game saga, just so we know what this means. And inside of this, we are going to put an infinite loop. And inside of this infinite loop, we are going to yield. And now we will have to get some actions. So first let's import the take effect from Redux Saga /effects, and also let's import the start game action from the slice. So let's go into the slices, game init, and from this we are going to get the start game action. And now we are going to yield take, and here we will wait for the start game action. So to get the action type, we get the start game action and the type property of that action. And whenever this action happens, we will fork a thread which will fetch the questions from the open trivia database. So let's yield fork. I'm also gonna import the fork from Redux Saga. And this fork will be a fork to fetch questions Saga, which we haven't created. So let's do that so it doesn't throw an error. It's gonna be a generator function, which is gonna be called fetch questions Saga. And for the moment, let's just leave it blank. Now let's import this start game Saga into our root Saga. So import start game from Saga game init Saga, and let's call it inside of our all start game. Just to see if it works, let's put a console log here and do fetch questions. Now let's refresh the page, and if I type something into the input, press start game and look inside our console, we will see that fetch question is console logged. So this function will be called. Inside of this function, we will make the call to our API to fetch the questions. Before we go further, let's fix this warning that we got right here. So let's go back into the main page because I forgot to add the breaks for the last two cases. So let's add those really quick. Now if I refresh, I'm just gonna get a warning in the saga.js that it doesn't like an anonymous expert, so we can fix that really quick by giving it a root saga name. And it just says that the game init doesn't have a yield, so this fetch question saga, but that will be fixed in a moment. So let's go further. Let's use a try catch block. So we're gonna catch the error. Inside of the try part, we are going to call the function that will get our data, and in the error part, we are going to handle what happens when the data fetching throws an error. So first, before we put anything inside the try, let's create another file inside of our utils folder. We'll call this api.js, and inside of this api.js, we will have to make our function for the API call. So I'm gonna go back to this open the trivia database and get this URL. I'm gonna store it into a constant, and then I'm gonna export constant fetch quiz from API. And inside of this function, we are going to return a fetch, and we are going to fetch the API URL. Then we're going to chain a dot then. We're going to get the response and return a response.json. And to this dot then, we are going to again chain another dot then and get the questions and return the questions.results. So our questions that we get from the API will be in this results key right here. Let's also catch the error here. So if an error is thrown, and do a promise.reject with the error. This rejected promise will be caught in this catch block right here and handled. Next, let's make the call from our fetch questions saga to the API. So for this, we are going to import put and call from Redux Saga effects. We're gonna use them to call a function and dispatch actions. First, we are going to make the call to the API. So we're gonna create a new constant called data. We're going to yield call. And in this call, we have to put our API function that we created before. So let's import it from the utils folder and API. And here we're gonna get the fetch quiz from API. And we are gonna call this fetch quiz from API. We don't have to pass any parameters, so that's why call has only one parameter. Okay, and let's console log the data to see what we receive. Let's go to the app. I'm gonna refresh and type something in the input, press start game, and we get an array of objects. This array of objects contains some details about the question, like the category, the correct answer, the difficulty, the incorrect answers. This is an array because there are also the possibility to have multiple choice questions. So those will be an array of items. This is just an array with one item, the question, and the type. We just requested true and false questions, so the type will be Boolean for all. But you could make a game with true and false and also questions that have multiple choice answers. Now I'm going to delete this console log and let's create a new slice for our game that will handle all the questions part. So we're going to have a new file called game.slice.js, or actually I named the one without slice, so let's just call it game.js. In this one, again, we are going to import create slice from at Redux.js toolkit. Then we're going to create the initial state as an object with a questions key that is an array, an error which is going to be null at the start, the score which is also going to be null at the start, and the current question index. So this way our Saga will know exactly at what question we are. We won't use these at the beginning, but we will need them later. Okay, now let's create our slice. So quiz slice is gonna be create slice. The name is going to be quiz. Then we're gonna pass the initial state and then the reducers. Here we will need two reducers. Fetch questions success, which is gonna get the state and the action. I'm gonna leave it blank for the moment. And the fetch questions fail reducer, again, it's gonna get the state and the action. Okay, so these two reducers are what we are going to use. One of them when the questions are fetched successfully, and the other one when there is an error fetching the questions. Now at the end, let's export as named exports fetch questions success and fetch questions fail as quiz slice dot actions, and export default the quiz slice reducer. Okay, before I forget, let's just add the quiz reducer to the root reducer, because I always forget to do this, so I'm not gonna do it this time. And let's add it as quiz. Now if okay, we have an error. I forgot to add the const there. It's supposed to be export const. Okay, like this. If I refresh and go into the Redux store, in the state we have our quiz state right now. Let's quickly create these reducers. So in case we have the fetch questions success, we are going to set the state.questions to be equal to action.payload. Next, we are going to set the state.score to be 0. So this way we will always have an initial score of 0 when the questions are fetched successfully. State.currentQuestionIndex is again going to be 0. So we'll select the first question. And that's about it for now. Next, in the fetch questions fail, we'll just set the state.error to be equal to action.payload. That means we are going to have to send a message in our payload that we want stored in our error handler. Okay, now let's go to the game init saga, and here in the try part of the block we are going to yield put, and now we have to get that action that we created. So we're going to import from the slices game, we are going to get the fetch questions success and fetch questions fail. And here we're going to put fetch questions success with the data that we received, that array that we received. And in case of an error, we are going to yield put and fetch questions fail. And here I'm just gonna type a message manually because I don't like the errors received from the open trivia debug. So I'm gonna type there was an error fetching the questions. Okay, so this is it. Now if I refresh the page, type something, start the game. Now in our, you can see when the quiz fetch questions success action is dispatched, we get an array of questions. We also get the score of 0 and the current question index set to null. Okay, but our game state doesn't change when the questions are fetched successfully. So you can see we still have this fetch message right here, which is the fetching page, the page that should be displayed with a spinner when the questions are being fetched. We don't want that. We need our game to jump to the third page of this, which is the game page in which we will display the questions. So let's do that. We're going into the game init slice. And here we need to add some extra reducers. So we'll need to handle some actions that were defined in other slices. Because normally your reducer handles actions that are defined in this slice, but we can handle fetch questions fail and fetch questions success that were defined in the game slice. For this, we have the extra reducers key in the create slice, which receives a builder, and on this builder we can do builder.addCase, and here in this case we can tell what our slice or our state should be changed if we get actions from other parts of our application. So we're gonna do fetch questions success, and again we're gonna have a function which receives the state and the action. And here we're just gonna set the state.stage to be equal to stages.game. Okay, and let's chain real quick another add case, and we're gonna handle the fetch questions fail. Again, state action. And here we are going to set the state.stage to be equal to start game. So in case we have an error fetching the questions, we want our game to be pushed to the initial state, so our user can try to start the game again. So we won't be stuck in this fetching place where we can't get out. Actually, we don't need the actions right here because we won't get anything in the payload for these extra reducers. Okay, now let's see if that works. Refresh, name, and now when the fetch question success is dispatched, you can see our stage changes from fetching game to game, and we can see the game page right here and the questions as before. Now let's create the fetching page. So what we can do on the fetching page. On this page, for the moment, we are going to have a p tag that's gonna say loading. We are gonna style this later and create a nice spinner. And on top of this, we are going to have a button which is gonna say cancel. And for this, we're gonna have an on-click handler. And when we click this button, so if the user manages to click the cancel button while the quiz is being fetched, then we are going to cancel the fetching and return him to the start page. Maybe he changed his mind and doesn't want to play anymore. Let's first let me clean up all the open files. Now let's go to our game init slice, and here we need to create a new reducer for when the user presses the cancel button. So we're gonna call it cancel game. It's gonna get the state and the action. Inside of this, we are going to set the state.stage to be equal to stages.startGame, and this is it. Now let's export this. So export the cancel game, and in our fetch page, let's import the cancel game from the store, slices, and game init. And also let's import use dispatch from React Redux. Let's initialize the dispatch as a call to use dispatch. And now in this onClick handler, we are going to call dispatch, and we are going to dispatch the cancel game action. Now let's refresh and type our name. And of course, this moves too quickly. So the fetching, my internet connection is pretty good and I get the questions really quick, but we can do something so that we can see this cancel button longer and we can actually test if it works. So let's go into Saga. We're gonna import the delay effect from Redux Saga effects. And here, before we call our API, we're gonna yield a delay of 1000 milliseconds. So 1 second. Now if I refresh, type a name, and I have time to click the cancel button, and it doesn't work because you have to call the dispatch function like this, not just pass a reference to it. Okay, let's try that again. So refresh, name, start game, press the cancel, and we start the game, which will start the fetching. We cancel the game, which puts our state to the start game, but our fetch questions still goes on, so it's not being cancelled. That's an issue because now we are in the game state, we have questions, but our user didn't want to finish playing. Let's fix that. So in Saga here, where we fork this fetch question Saga, we can actually store that in a constant. So let's call it forked Saga. And now we are going to yield another fork, and this time to cancel the fetch quiz. I'm going to call it cancel fetch quiz, and I'm going to pass the forked Saga to it. And inside of this cancel fetch quiz, it's going to be another generator function. And here we are going to handle the cancellation of our fetch questions Saga. Inside of this cancel fetch quiz generator function, we are going to create an infinite loop. And inside of this, we are going to yield take. And here we are going to wait for the cancel game action. So let's import that real quick from the game init, cancel game. And we are going to wait for cancel game.type. And if we receive that action, we are going to yield cancel. So this cancel is another effect from Redux Saga with which we can cancel forked effects. So we're gonna cancel, and here we receive the forked Saga and we can cancel it. This way, when we dispatch the cancel game action, we will cancel the fetching of the question, so that won't happen anymore. Let me refresh. I'm gonna type my name, press start, and then press cancel. And now you can see we don't actually get the dispatched fetch questions success anymore. Going further, we will have to handle our game page. So now if we type our name, press start game, we get to this game page. And here we are going to play our game. For the game logic, we are going to create a new Saga called game.js. Inside of this, we are going to export default a function called a generator function actually called game Saga. And here we will have our main logic for the game. For this, let's create our import from Redux Saga effects. We're going to get the take from now. Redux Saga effects, and in an infinite loop we are going to yield take, and here we will wait for the fetch questions success. So our game starts when we get the dispatch for fetch questions success from the slices, and it was in the game slice. Okay, so when fetch questions success.type, so when this action is dispatched, we will write our logic for the game. For the logic, we will have 60 seconds time, and if the user doesn't answer all the questions, either way the game will be finished and we'll give him the results for the number of questions that he answered. To have a 60-second timer, we are going to get another effect called race. This allows us to create a race, so only the first finisher effect will be terminated, the other ones will be cancelled, and we'll raise two different effects. One of them I'll call delay, and I'll just set a delay of 60 seconds, so 60,000 milliseconds. My IDE auto imported it here. And the other effect is going to be called done. And here, this done effect will be another saga. I'm going to call it answers saga. For the moment, it's not created. So let's create it real quick so it doesn't throw an error. So function game saga. And this is it. After either of these finishes, so either 60 seconds passes or in this game saga, it will finish when we answer all the 10 questions. After this, we will dispatch an action called finish game. So let's create that real quick. And after that, we'll go and create our game saga. In the game init slice, we will have another reducer called finish game state action. And this will just set the state.stage to be equal to stages.endgame. Now let's go back into our game saga, import this finish game from slices game init, and also let's get the put effect. And after this race, we are going to yield put and put the finish game. Now let's add this game saga to our root saga. So here we're going to import game from saga and game, and let's add it to the yield all. So game, and we're gonna run it. Now we seem to have an error. So what did I do wrong? I have the default export and I mistakenly named this again game saga. So it's supposed to be answers saga. Now if I refresh, okay, another error, we did not export the finish game from the init. So if we go into game init slice, we have to also export this finish game action. Okay, now it's supposed to work. So let's test it. I'm gonna first set this delay to a shorter period. So let's set it to 2 seconds because I don't want to wait 60 seconds. Type the name, press start game. Okay, this didn't work because the delay of 2 seconds actually takes 2 seconds to finish, but this is an empty saga, so nothing happens inside it. So let's create our core logic for it. Here we are going to have a for. Here we are going to have a for. Let I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus, and inside of this I, we are going to yield take, and this take will have to get the answer question action. That action will be dispatched when the user clicks on the answer for a question. So we won't be able to test this now. I'll just set it back to 60 seconds so I don't forget. And we'll test it a little bit later after we create that action. Here in this take, we will have to wait for an action called answer questions. So we will create that. And when that action is dispatched, we will put another action called next question. So this way, we will handle the logic in the reducers for when the user answers a question, we will check if it's correct, and we'll also dispatch another action to load the next question. Let's do that real quick. So inside of our game slice, we will create those two actions. So let's create the answer question one first. It's gonna get the state and the action. And inside of this, we will have to do some logic. So let's first find out what is the current question. So current question is gonna be state.questions. And here for this, we're going to get the state.current question index. Now let's update the score if the user added a correct answer. So state.score is going plus equals. And now we will have to do our ternary if check. So action.payload.answer. So we will have to get an answer inside the payload. We will check if that is equal to current question dot correct underscore answer. And if that is true, then we will add 1 to our score, else we will add 0. And this is it for now. So we just update the score if that is correct. And let's also create the next question reducer, which also gets the state and the action. And inside of this, we are just going to set the state dot current question index to plus equal 1. So this way we get the answer question action, and here we handle the logic for updating the score. In the next question action, that is dispatch, we handle updating the current question index. Now let's export these actions before I forget again. So answer question and next question. And let's go into our game saga, import answer question and next question from the slices and the game. And now we will wait for the answer question action, and we will dispatch yield put the next question. This should be it for the answer saga. So now the rest will be inside of our UI, but now we can test this. So we can test if this race actually works. Let me refresh the page, set this delay to 2 seconds now, refresh again, and now I type my name, press the start game, fetch question success, and after 2 seconds you can see our game state finish game action was dispatched and our screen moved to the end screen. Now it works. Okay, let's set this delay back to 60 seconds and let's move to our game page and create the UI for it. So in the game page here, let's first import the use selector and use dispatch hooks from React Redux. I'm gonna already initialize the use dispatch hook because we'll need it later. And now let's display our first question inside of our UI. We'll create a constant called current question. This is gonna be a call to use selector. We're gonna get the state and return state dot quiz dot questions. And from the questions array, so from this array right here, we will get the state dot quiz dot current question index with 2 R's. Okay, so now whenever this current question index changes, our question will be changed. Now let's display that question. So I'm gonna create a p tag here, and our question is gonna be inside of this, but it's in HTML form. So we have to set the dangerously set inner HTML of this p tag to be equal to an object with underscore underscore HTML, and to that we pass the current question. Now if I refresh, let me refresh the page and press start game. Okay, it's an object because here from this we get the object, and I should get so in this state we get an object and I should get the question key from that object. And now you can see it refreshed and we get our first question. Now let's also get the score and the current question index. So let's create a new constant called score. It's gonna be again a use selector. We get the state and return state dot quiz dot score, and also the state dot current question index, and use selector state, and we return state dot quiz dot current question index. And we can display these at the top. So let's create another p tag, score, and put the score here, and also create another p tag with the, let's put it like current question index, then a slash, and out of 10. Now let's refresh, see how that looks. Okay, so we have the score and the question that we are right now. Okay, next let's create the buttons for answering true and false. Here we will have a button which is gonna say true, and I'm gonna copy it just one time, and the other one is gonna say false. And the onClick handler for this is going to be a call to a function, which is going to be called answer question, not the one that we have in the other part of our application. And to this, we're going to pass a string with true with an uppercase T. And we're going to do the same for the false, but we're going to pass an uppercase false. Now let's handle this. Let's create this answer question function. It's going to get the answer. And inside of it, we will have to dispatch the answer question action. Let's dispatch. Actually, let's rename this function to answer handler because our answer question is the action. So let's name it like this. And we're going to dispatch this answer question action from the slice answer question with the answer that the user clicked on. So this answer needs to be true and false with uppercase letters so we can compare them to the ones that we receive from the API. Okay, let's see how that looks now. Bad logic in the checking. Okay, so this doesn't seem to work because my score doesn't update at all. So let's go back to our game slice and check if this answer questions reducer works here. Actually, this reducer looks good. I believe the problem is that I didn't send the answer as an object, but I actually sent it here as just the answer. So I'm gonna put it inside of an object and let's try that again. So name, start game. And now if we answer correctly, you can see I answered I'm at the 6th question, but my score is 4. And when we finish all the questions, we are moved to the end stage, even if the 60 seconds didn't pass. Okay, let's also add a button also here. So it's going to be another button. This time we're going to dispatch a finish game action, which will end our game. Doesn't matter if we used up all our questions. So on click, we're going to have a end game handler. Actually, let's just pass a reference to it because we don't need any parameters. And the button will say quit game. Now let's create that const end game handler. Inside of this end game handler, we are going to dispatch and we have to get the finish game action from our slice. So let's import finish game from the store slices and game init. And now we can dispatch the finish game. So this should be pretty quick. Let's type our name, the game, answer a few questions, and then press the quit game. And it takes us to the end screen directly. And I wrote quiz, not quit. Okay, now the last thing the game page needs right now is a timer, so we don't at the moment display how much time the user has left. Let's do that. So for that we're gonna need use state and use effect from React. We are going to create a new state, so const time left and set time left is gonna be a call to use state. And we're going to initialize it with 60 seconds. And then we are going to create a use effect. And inside of this use effect will only be run once. So that's why we put this empty array. And inside of this empty array, we're going to create a constant called interval. And we're going to set an interval here. And in this interval, we're gonna set the time left. We're gonna get its previous value and return previous -1. And this interval will be run at every 1000 milliseconds. Just so we do some cleanup, at the end, we're gonna return from this useState hook, we're gonna return a function and we're gonna clear the interval and pass the interval constant. Okay. Let's display it here. So time left and we put the time left constant. Now let's refresh the page. Name, loading, and now our time left is being displayed right here. Okay, I can also quit game and it takes me to the end screen. Okay, our game is almost finished. We still have this end game page, and we also have those answers that we didn't store until now, so we can display the questions that were answered with the true and false correct answers. So first let's create the end game page. On this end game page we will just need a button. So on this, for the moment, we'll just have a button that is gonna say restart game, and we're gonna have an on-click handler with the restart handler function. Let's create that restart handler. Okay, and from this we will dispatch an action. So let's get use dispatch from React Redux. It's not const, it's import. Okay, let's initialize it. Const dispatch equals use dispatch, and let's call it empty for now here because we haven't created that restart game action. So let's go into the game init slice here. After finish game, let's create a restart game action. It gets the state and the action, and this is gonna be a pretty simple reducer. It's just gonna do the same thing as the cancel game. So we're gonna set the stage to start game. If you want, you can also set the score to 0 right now, but I am setting the score to 0 here in slice.js when the questions are fetched successfully, so it doesn't really matter. You can do it any way you like. Now in the game init slice, let's export this restart game action. In the end page, I'm gonna import restart game from store slices and game init. And here we are going to call this and dispatch this restart game. Okay, now if I press restart game, I have to refresh first. Again, finish the game, quit game, and if I press restart, it takes me to the first screen. So this works. Next, let's handle the storing of the answered questions so we can display them on the end screen. For that, let's go into the game slice, and here when we answer a question, we will push them inside of an array. So let's add the answers array initialized as an empty array in the initial state. When we have to also set this array to empty when we fetch the questions successfully, so we don't store on top of other questions. So it's gonna be an empty array. And now when we answer a question, we have to store that answered question inside of this array. So we will do state.answers.push, and inside of this we will push an object which will contain the question, which will be the current question.question. This way we will have the text for that question. The answer is gonna be action.payload.answer. Next, the correct answer is gonna be the current question.correct_answer. And we can have an isCorrect state right here. So we have a boolean and we can change the color of the text based on this boolean. So we'll have an isCorrect, which is gonna be action.payload.answer being equal to current question.correct_answer. Okay, this is it. Now if I refresh, type the name. Now when I answer a question, you can see on the answer questions dispatch, we can see in the answers array, we have the state for our answered question. So this is all that we need for this question. Now let's go into the endgame page, and on this endgame page, let's display these questions that we answered. So for that, we're going to need the use selector hook. Here we are going to create a new constant called answers, which is going to be a call to use selector. We'll get the state and return state.quiz.answers. Okay, now let's display these questions. So we're gonna just do a simple map here. We're gonna do answers.map, we're gonna get an answer. And now for this, we're gonna create a p tag and we're gonna put answer.question. And then we can also do answer.answer, which is gonna be true or false. And if you want to, we can do answer.correct_answer. So we have both of them. Don't worry, these will be styled nicer later, but for now we can just do this. So let's refresh the page, try something, answer a few questions. And here you can see we don't have the correct answer because after the second line we don't have anything. So let's see why. So inside of the answers array, oh, it's correct answer with an uppercase A. So correct answer. Now if I refresh, you can see both of them here. Don't worry, we'll style these later. But for now, everything works. We can also display the score right here real quick. So let's create a new constant called score and use selector state and return state.quiz.score. And we're gonna put it right here. So your score was score out of 10. Okay, now you may notice these strange characters here because by mistake I didn't put the answer in dangerously set inner HTML. So let's do that real quick. I'm gonna create a div here instead of the p tag. I'm gonna put a paragraph, and here dangerously set inner HTML is gonna be an object, underscore HTML is gonna be answer.question, and I'm gonna remove it from here. Okay, now it looks better. We have all those commas and everything that was using HTML entities. Now the only part left is to add the styling. For the styling, we are going to use Tailwind CSS. I don't want to use normal CSS for this because Tailwind is more fun and you can also add styling quicker with it if you just learn the basics. So let's first add Tailwind to our app. I'm just gonna search, so go to Tailwind CSS docs/installation. I'm gonna leave the link in the description below. And here we're gonna choose create React app. And it tells us what we have to do. So I already have the project. Then we have to install Tailwind via npm. So I'm gonna copy this, close my development server and run the npm command. While we wait for the npm install to finish, I want to show you real quick about IntelliSense extension for VS Code that will help you add class names easier to your project. So you just have to search for Tailwind, and it's the first one here. It's called Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. Make sure you have this installed, and as you see here in this example, if you start typing class names, it will give you really great suggestions, so that way you won't have to remember all the class names. Okay, now that this was installed, we next have to install also Krakow, because this is how we'll run our projects. Okay, now that Krakow was installed, we will have to change something in our package.json. So let me close all of these, open package.json, and we will replace the first 3 scripts with the ones from the documentation. Okay, save this. Next, we are going to create a krakow.config file and put this configuration from the documentation. So new file krakow.config.js and paste this. Next, we will have to initialize our Tailwind CSS configuration file. So we'll run npx tailwind css init, and it will generate a tailwind.config.js for us, and it will generate a tailwind.config.js for us. Inside of this, it's the default configuration. You can extend your themes and add custom variables to it and a lot of configuration in Tailwind. I won't go into the details because this is not a Tailwind crash course or something. If you want me to make one of those, let me know in the comments below. The last step we have to do to configure Tailwind is just replace this purge line, what we get from the docs, so it removes unused styling in production. So this way only the styling that is actually used in the project will remain in the production bundle. Okay, and the last thing is to include the tailwinds in our CSS file, so in index.css. So that's why I left this index.css empty. I'm gonna paste these, and the last step in the documentation is to import the index.css, but that is already imported in this project. Okay, now we can run npm start, and if you look in the console, this will run Krakow start, not the default React one. And after our development server starts, we will continue with our styling for the application. Great, now our development server is running and we can continue adding Tailwind to our app. I'm gonna close these two tabs and also close all the files. So as you can see, Tailwind stripped some of our styling, so it resets some of the default styling for the elements, like for this button or for the input. We will have to add those styles by ourselves. Let's get started. So first, let's go to the main page. And here we have just the displayed page, but I want to add some styling to it, so I'll create a div instead of the React fragment. On this div, we'll put the class name attribute, and here inside we add our Tailwind classes, so we style our application. I'm gonna use for the whole application font mono, so it's a monospace font. We're gonna use background purple 50. Okay, and you can see for under the button, you can see we have a slight background color. Now let's also set the min height to screen. This will set it to 100 viewport heights. And now we have a light shade of purple here. At the top, I want to also have a header, which is gonna be like a title for our game. So I'm gonna call it Redux Saga Quiz Game. And on this, let's do the class names, background purple 500, text is gonna be white, 4 pixels of padding. Also, let's make the text big, like text 2XL, set it text center, and also make it uppercase. So this is the way you add styling to Tailwind. It's really neat and it cuts your development time by a lot. Okay, so this is it for the header. Now we can go into the different pages and style them as we go along. The first one is gonna be the start game page. So let's go. Here we have this div and let's add the class name. And on this we are going to do display flex, flex direction column, justify center, and also items center. And also let's set a margin top of 80. And that will position all of them in the center. I'm not gonna create a separate component for the input because we just have this one. So just add class name to it. And for this, let's do a padding on the y-axis of 2, px4, so on the horizontal axis. Remove the outline, so outline none. Rounded, that will give it a border radius. Shadow, W64, so this will make it like around 300 pixels. And the margin bottom 6. And you can see our input looks pretty nice now. We can type into it. You can also add some focus styling to it, but I'm just gonna leave it like this. I like the way it looks. For the button, we are going to create a separate component because we're gonna use it in multiple places. So I'm gonna create a components folder. Inside of this, I'm gonna put a button.js. And here, let's create a button component real quick. So I'm going to use RAFC again from the ES7 extension. We are going to get some props here. So I'm going to destructure the children, the onClick handler, the type, and I'm going to create a property called add class names. So the type is going to be either error or a normal button, and add class names, I'm gonna use this if we want to add different styling to our button for a specific button on top of the default styling. So from this, we are just going to return a button. The button is gonna be, the text inside of it is gonna be the children, so we'll use it just like a normal button tag. Now let's put the onClick handler as the onClick. And let's do the class names as a string template literal. This time not just a simple string, because we'll attach some different variables to it. First, before we style it, I'm gonna import it into the start game page so we see what we are doing to it. So import button from out components button and replace our button. Okay, I'm not gonna put any type on this one because this one is gonna be a normal button, and I also don't want any additional styling on this one, but we'll have it ready. Now let's create the color based on the type. So the default color is going to be, I'm just gonna call it purple, and we'll create a class name based off of this color. And now if type is error, then we set the color to be red. Now let's create our styling. So the background, so the property name normally is bg line color and the number 50, 100, and then it goes up to 900. But this time we are going to use the color variable color and 500. So this is going to be the background color. Now if I save, you can see we have this nice purple color. And if we put a property of type being error, then this button will change to red. Okay, next on hover, we want to set the background and again the same color to 2 tones darker. So now if I between hover and hover colon and the property, you can't have any spaces. And now it's the light color and it changes color when we hover. Then on focus, we want to not have any outline, so outline none. A padding vertical 3, px 6, then text is gonna be white. We're gonna put a shadow and make it rounded. And at the end, we're gonna add the add class names variable that we have. So if we want to have any more styling to this, we just put an add class names property on the button, and that styling will be added at the end. So if we want, for example, to replace the shadow, we just have to write it again here. Okay, so this is our UI for the start page. Now let's go further and style the fetching page. So this page that is displayed when to be able to see the fetching page for long enough so we can style it, let's go into the game init saga. So here where we fetch the questions and set this delay to more. So I'm gonna set it to 60,000. Setting this delay will allow us to see the loading screen for long enough so we can style it. So if I type my name, press start game, now the loading screen will take 600,000 milliseconds to go to the next steps and actually call the API. This way we can style it. So let's go to the fetching page. Now this p tag right here, we're not gonna actually display that. So I'm gonna delete it and replace it with a simple div. And inside of this div, I'm gonna put another one. And from this, we are going to make a nice spinner. So on the first one, let's add the class name. And inside of this class name, we're gonna make it with the width of 16, so W16, H also 16, so we have a square. Then we are going to make the background purple and 500. Then we're gonna make it rounded dash full to make it a circle. We're gonna display flags, items center, and a margin bottom of 12, so it pushes the button a little bit down. So let's save that. And now we have a circle. Before we style the moving thing inside the circle, let's place everything in the middle. So on the topmost div, let's add flex, flex column, justify center, items center, and a margin top of 80. And now everything is in the center. Let's go further with this div in the middle. So on this one, we're gonna add the class name. We're gonna put W12, H also 12, so another square. This time we're gonna make the background purple 200, rounded full again. So it's gonna be a circle inside of a circle. And it's gonna look like this. It should be in the center, but it's not. It's just on the vertical axis in the center. So I have to add justify center to the darker purple div. And now the circle is in the middle. With this, on this circle, we want it to animate, and Tailwind has a few default animations. One of them will work really nicely for this, so I'm gonna add the next class animate bounce. And if I save, now you can see our circle bounces inside of the other one. I pretty much like this for a spinner for this game. It won't be displayed for too much anyways. And for the button, let's import our button component. So import button from components button and replace the HTML button. And this is it. So this is all we have, a spinner and the cancel button. If I click the cancel button, it takes us back to our initial screen. Now let's remove this delay that we added. So this one right here, we can remove the whole delay, so not set it back to 1 second. And now if I save, refresh the page, type the name, press start game, we see the loading for a really quick, and then the game loads. Now let's go further and style this game page. So again, we are going to need to set a delay because now we have 60 seconds until this screen disappears, and that won't be long enough. So let's go into the game saga, so game.js, and here in the race we will set the delay. We will just add one more 0 to it. Now our timer will be off, so it will be able to go past 0 because the race won't be finalized after 60 seconds, and we can style everything in this. Okay, let's go to the game page, and here we will style every item. So the first one is the container. We're gonna set a class name, display it flex, flex direction column, items center, and we're gonna position it relative because we will have this quit button positioned absolute. Okay, now it disappeared. I have to refresh the page because I didn't refresh it when I set the delay. Type the name, press start, and now everything is displayed flex. So we want a circle here at the top in which we have the time. The score will be on the left and the number of questions on the right. Let's do that for now. So we just want the number of seconds, so I'll remove this time left. Then let's add a class name, and let's do it like this. We will have an h20, so height 20, width also 20, flex, justify center, items center, border of 8 pixels, border purple 500, and rounded dash full. And now if I save, you can see we have this really nice circle that starts from the top of the screen. Now let's just move it a little bit down because it's merged with the header. So an my, so a margin on the y-axis of 4. The text, let's make it 3XL, so let's make it bigger, and also text purple 500 to add that purple color. And now we have this nice timer. Okay, next let's do the score. So I'll delete this text right here because I don't want it, I just want the number. And let's do class name, and on this let's position it absolute, top 4, left 4, and text will be 2XL, so a little bit smaller than the timer, and also text purple 500. Now if I save, our score moves here to the right. For the number of questions, we will do kind of the same, but on the right side of the page. And this is it for the score and the question number. Now we have to go further and style the container for the question, so for the question text, and then we'll add the buttons. So on the p tag, let's add the class name, and here we will do something really simple. So padding 7, then a background white, rounded, and a shadow. This is it. I don't want to add anything more. You can read the question really nicely, so for me it's enough. If you want to style it more, go ahead. Now for these two buttons, I will actually add a div to be able to move them around easier. And inside of this div, I'm just gonna add the class name, display flex, justify, this time it's gonna be justify between, so justify space between, width of 96 and margin top of 8. And now we have two buttons. Next, let's import the button component. So import button from components button and replace these two buttons. And that's it for these two buttons. Now we can press true and false. And the last one is this quit game. So let's add another div so we can move it around. I'm gonna put the button inside it, and on this div we're gonna add a class name and position it absolute bottom 4 right 4, and replace this button. And additionally I want it to be red, so I'll set the type to be error. And now you can see we have this button right here because I put the div on it's relative to this container div right here, which has the height until here. But I want it actually on the same level with that div. So I'm gonna cut it, put it on the same level, and now let's wrap everything in a React fragment so it doesn't throw an error. And now our button is safe here at the bottom. Now if we click it, it will move us to the end screen. Lastly, we will have to style the end page. So let's go there. And here we will have to add all the elements. So add all the questions. And here, so I'm gonna press restart game, type it, then answer the questions because I want to have something to style. And here we have the data for our endgame page. So let's start with the container. So I'll do class name, and on this we'll have flex column, items, center, nothing too special. Now on the score, let's do a class name, text to Excel, so pretty big, and a margin bottom of 4. So it pushes this restart game button a little bit down. Also, on top of it, I want to add an H1, which is gonna say game over. And let's also style this one. So class name, and for this, let's do text 3XL, so a little bit bigger than the score. Text purple 500. And a margin on the y-axis of 4 pixels. Okay, this looks pretty nice. Also, let's put the score, so this, so the score that the user got inside of a span, and we'll make that also purple. So let's do class name and text purple 500. And now we have the score the user got highlighted. For the button, we will just import the button component. Import button from components button and replace our HTML. And we have a button. Okay, and now we have to style these answers. So I'll put them inside of a div so we can position them and add some margins if we need. And I'll add a margin top of 4 and a padding all around of also 4. Then we will have to move around the things that we added until now, so I'll change it up a little bit. I'll delete this really quick. We will have a div. Inside of this div, we will have this p tag, which has the question. And then I don't want the correct answer and the user's answer. I just want one of them, so I'll keep the user's answer. I'll delete this correct answer. Put the user's answer inside of a span, and now we can style both of them. So first on the div, let's add the class name. So it's gonna be a border bottom of 2 pixel, border purple 500, flex, justify between, and a background of white. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now on the p tag, let's add some padding to it. So class name, let's do padding of 2 pixels and a margin right of also 2, so it has some space between this and the answer. Okay, and now let's style the span. So class name, on this class name we will do a template literal, so let's add padding of 2 so it looks nice and centered like the other one. And here we will change the color of the text based on if the user answered correctly or not. So if answer dot correct answer is equal to answer dot answer, then we will have text green 500, and if the answer was not correct, we will have text red 500. Okay, now if I save, you can see we have 6 correct answered questions and they are marked with green, and the questions that were answered wrong are marked with red, and you have the user's answer right here. So if they are marked with red, the user knows this is not the answer. This was it. So now we have a fully styled game. I can refresh the page, type my name here, and let's play it for once. So true, true, false. I'm just gonna get them all random, and I got a 4 out of 10. The game works. I can press the restart game and I'm taken back to the loading screen. So this was it. It was a pretty long video, but I hope you learned a lot. We went through a lot of different Redux Toolkit functions, Redux Saga. We also added Tailwind CSS. So a lot of new features and a lot of new functionality. This was my favorite way to learn Redux Saga and also use Redux Toolkit in a different way. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so I'm motivated to make more videos like this. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.